Hello and welcome to Ananke's Women in Literature 2025. I'm delighted to be back again, and this time we start off with Muneeb Qadir. Muneeb, welcome. Thank you so
Thank you
much for
so
joining
much.
us.
Thank you for having me.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Muneeb is a lawyer by profession. He's a professor of human rights law and constitutional law at the Millennium Universal College. He is author of two books. One is Paying the Price: Religious Extremism, Misogyny, Transphobia, and Class Apartheid in Pakistan. His second book, called The Age of Intolerance: Global Populism and Decline of Democracy in the 21st Century. I've got the second one here, so I'm going to take the liberty of sharing the cover. And Muneeb, I can see you've got both books behind you. So if you could just point them out for our viewers, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'd actually show it up close as well. So this is the first
Please
book, Paying
do.
the Price. And I think that the book cover is extremely telling of what it's about.
Absolutely.
Everything is on fire. And what this represents is oppression, anger, marginalization, otherization. And for us Pakistanis, these symbols are extremely relatable because we've been seeing it and culture wars being fought around these very symbols. People who deride these rights movements, and then those who advocate for these movements or these causes. And so it's become so much part of Pakistani contemporary culture that I thought that not much has been written about this because it's
That's
so
yeah,
recent. And I thought that from a
absolutely.
Pakistani perspective, having a person who's been sitting here in Pakistan and been at the forefront of these culture wars, what better than to, give tribute to what we see and how hate speech and misinformation, disinformation around these very worthy causes creates this situation where we are all engulfed, and we are obviously surrounded by the possibility of either some mob getting after our lives
Yeah,
or some sort of mob justice or risk to our security and life surrounding us all the time. So
that's
this
right.
is what the book is about, and I think that the cover gives a very good idea of what you're signing up for when you've
No,
purchased it.
absolutely. And I think it's so important. People generally don't give much importance to book covers, but a book cover can either make or break a book. And it's so important in this day and age, particularly. I think you've hit the nail on the head when you talk about visual depiction, where people's attention spans have limited. And so they need to know exactly what the book is about, what it concerns, just by looking at the cover. So that's a brilliant. And I think I quite like this cover as well. I think this
Yes,
sums up
and there's a lot of
exactly
fire in
what's
this
happening.
as well.
Yes.
Buildings are burning and whatnot. And both the times, when I was getting the covers designed, so these are the visions I had in my mind. So for Paying the Price, because it deals with four very pressing burning issues, which
Yeah.
is religious extremism and misogyny, and then there's transphobia and class apartheid. So my brief to my cover designer was that, I'm just having this image in my mind that there's somebody wearing a chadar and something. Now, in a way, you could think of it as stereotyping, but on the other hand, it does represent the idea
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
honor in patriarchal society like Pakistan. And you really don't know the person who's wearing this chadar. Is this a trans woman? Is this a biological woman? Is this a woman in general? But the
Yeah.
brunt of words like honor, of what your religious or cultural norms or your moral or social norms demand, the
Yeah.
burden is heavily placed on women and on womanhood.
No, absolutely. And I think you said something very, very important then. I'm going to start off with that. When you said that you don't know who is and what they're thinking or what they're saying, right? So, I'm going to dive straight in. You and I, well, I'd like to think we come from the same generation. You start off by, at least in Age of Intolerance, by picking up on something that I feel has remained unexplored, undocumented in the Pakistani context, which is 9/11. There is absolutely little to nothing about how 20 years of our lives, and I'm just going to say that Muneeb is younger than me, so he's probably, hopefully seen less, been affected less by it, but still significantly so. 20 years of at least my life have been defined by 9/11, from when I was a schoolgirl to a university student to a young professional to a mother to who I am today, nearing middle age. I'd like to start off with, like, why would you, a young man, pick up 9/11? I know it affected you. I know it
Yes,
did. But
yes.
you write about it in a way where I finally, and I'm certain others who read it, finally feel validated that this is not just my story. This is not just my paranoia. Because I find whenever I've spoken about it, that, do you know how badly 9/11 affected me? People have been like, yeah, stop it. Stop it. And I'm like, you don't get it. It's not that simple. But you picked up on it. Why?
I think that for us it was a very defining moment because as a 90s kid, something that I've also
Yeah,
written in the book
90s kid.
itself,
Yeah.
that's what I call myself. Uh, I was lucky enough that I got the chance to travel. I mean, I give the credit to my parents that
Yeah.
they really invested in my and my sister when we were children. They invested in our childhood experiences. So, it wasn't very common, and it's still not very common that when you're a young child in Pakistan, you're allowed to travel a lot for economic reasons, first of all. And
Yeah.
so, yes, I have referenced 9/11, but I've always tried not to sound like a victim in the book because I am not a victim. Because compare my life to so many other Pakistanis and so many
Sure.
other people in the world. We are living in an age when people in Sudan are suffering from starvation, and let's not even get us started
Absolutely.
on what's
Yeah.
happening
Yeah.
in Gaza or even Ukraine for that matter. So, given all that privilege that I have, it just looks bad on my part to be writing poor me in my book. So I've avoided that. Yet at the same time, yes, it has affected us. And it
Yeah.
tells us a lot more about me or you. It tells us more about the world around us. Despite
Yes.
all our
Yes.
privilege, yours and mine, it tells me much more about the kind of world that we live in, that even when privileged people start feeling that they're on the defensive, that they have to be on their
Yeah.
toes constantly, continuously on tenterhooks for no fault of their own. You can well imagine
Yeah.
that those who are at the very bottom of that social ladder,
That's right.
on both domestic and global level, just how much bad and how much worse it must be for them. So 9/11 for me, as even though an elite, but as a Pakistani elite, was a very defining moment because in my childhood years, going to the United States of America was no hassle. You just needed to have
No.
money. So
Yes, that's right.
we were upper middle class, so we could afford that. And we just had to fill in a very simple visa form. I mean, there used to be
That's it.
times even before my birth when there used to be visa on arrival. But when
Yeah.
I was born, just a visa form, just your basic information, it used to be formality, and you would get a visa. I mean, you could not imagine a situation that someone from my economic background would be rejected a visa. And
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
effortlessly, we would just enter into the United States of America, no interrogation at the airport, and just feeling that other than the language differences, linguistic differences, or the accent, and the skin color and the history, nothing would really put me in a disadvantageous
It never made
position.
to feel like you've done something wrong, or you're part of something that's viewed in a negative way. Yeah.
One of the funny memories I have is this must be somewhere 1995, 1996. So we were on a 4th July parade in Boston.
Oh, nice.
And so we had these American people, as in actual American people, sitting next to us, and they asked us where we were from, and my parents told them that we are from Pakistan, and that American lady wasn't very sure where Pakistan was. So it was neutral. Being from Pakistan wasn't bad, wasn't
Yeah.
good, but now it would just, set alarms ringing. If you
Oh,
were to
yeah.
mention you're from Pakistan, or at least you would feel guilty for no rhyme or reason. So that's what happened after
Yeah.
9/11. That Muneeb Qadir today, with all his economic
Sure.
privileges,
Privilege.
with all the privilege, with all the exposure that I've had, and all the vast travel experience I've had, even a Muneeb Qadir, just because my
Yeah.
passport tells the world that I'm Muslim, and because Pakistani passport is one of those very few passports which mentions your religion. A British passport
Yes.
wouldn't, an American
Yeah.
passport wouldn't. And just because it's a Pakistani passport and then you're male, and so you exactly fit that profile of the kind of person that immigration officers would be very wary of if you're entering into their country. And that
Yeah.
has it's something that I'm so aware of, and I feel guilty about it as well. And I'm made to feel guilty about it.
You're
And
made
you
to feel
make
that's
to feel like a
exactly it.
criminal,
Yeah.
even though you're
Yeah.
not. you've done nothing. You as secular, you're as tolerant, a word much misused, as just the next American, as the next Hungarian, as the next Danish person. But somehow, because you know that green passport, which says that you're a Muslim, that's where racial profiling starts for you. So, you know, the first barrier is always affordability. But even if my point is, even if you're like a millionaire or a billionaire Pakistani, the second question comes in, and that's the primary question. You've got to prove that you're not, the word starts with the T, ends with the T.
And
Tell.
it's something, yeah, and it's something that we see repeated. It's a pattern that we see repeated today. And this is what gets me, like 20 years of our lives defined by 9/11. And now when we see, like you very correctly said, what we see happening in Gaza as well. Now it's like, do you support Hamas or not? And ultimately you're made to feel guilty simply on the basis of what? By association, by
Absolutely.
some form of sympathy, by the very same values that you may well have been, and we'll get to this at a later stage, the values that you appreciate in the West, and you have imbibed into your own life, and you're made to feel guilty about it. And I think something interesting also came out from 9/11, Muneeb, something that you've picked up on, is the amount of misogyny that we saw during the war on terror, and how women and children and generally anything that was non-male was being viewed and treated. And it wasn't until many years later that people actually began to pick up on, and I think it was actually during the war in Gaza right now taking place, that we've seen this concept that, women and children are suffering. During the war on terror, there was never any mention of women and children. It was always, how many thousands of terrorists have died, how many thousands of victims of terrorism have died. And that was it. And here you are, and you suddenly link this, that hang on a second, there is a gender element to this as well. And through the war on terror, we've seen the rise of populism. So we've seen populism and we've seen misogyny become part of this rising awareness that, hang on a second, we need to break down segments of society to understand this massive oppression, suppression, which is taking place in Pakistan. How do you see the link between populism and misogyny emerging in Pakistan? Where do you pinpoint it from the start?
I believe that misogyny is to populism what your backbone is, you know, to a human being. It's at
Right.
the very heart, at the very center of
Yeah.
populism. Populism feeds on misogyny, and then populism also feeds into misogyny. And it all starts with, I think, I might be in the minority, perhaps. I don't know whether other people share my view, but I think that the whole concept of statehood, not just that it's very toxic, but I think that the
Yeah.
whole concept of statehood, territorial sovereignty, borders is rooted in patriarchy. And I'll tell you how. It goes something
Okay.
like this. In international law, we are taught. So when I was studying international law, which was in 2010, I had started. So now it was 15 years back.
Sure.
It was this concept of sovereign equality, that every state is equally sovereign. And this is exactly what was agreed between European nations under the Treaty of Westphalia, that
Right.
every state is sovereign in its own right, which means that every state, whatever land that it has conquered already, or whatever colonies, because that was the time of,
Of
colonization,
course.
when nobody would even frown upon it. So if you've added colonies, and if you've added your overseas territories into your territorial conquests, and then you've got your own state or your own country of you, or you declared that you're now a sovereign state,
Yes.
then once that has happened and you've asserted control on your lands, on your
Yeah.
territory,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
that land is like your mother. And so your country becomes your mother, and then it becomes your motherland. And just like, extremely patriarchal men have for centuries said that I am the patriarch of my household,
Yeah.
and what happens inside the four walls of the house is my domain, and not for
Yeah.
state to intervene into. It's not for the law of the country to intervene into. It's a private matter. And that's exactly why, crimes like domestic violence, marital rape are not even regarded as crimes, because this concept of territoriality had been
Yeah.
so normalized, from the state level to the private domestic level, that the supremacy of the male figure, either in the form of the state, which actually was a man, or
Yeah.
the patriarch was the head of the household, who would be the breadwinner for the
Sure.
house. And because he was the breadwinner, so everybody within the house, mostly women, as in wives or daughters, were completely dependent on him. He was free to do whatever he wanted to do. You could not intervene in the internal affairs of what was going on in the
No.
house.
No.
Statehood also gained this, this sort of lingo that human rights are an internal affair. They are an internal matter. So
Yeah.
there's a reason when in Pakistan, whenever criticism is directed at Pakistan's treatment of its religious or ethnic minorities or gender minorities, or when you question India's treatment of Muslims or Dalits or Kashmiris, for that matter, people like Narendra Modi, or the dictators that we've had in our country, or
Yeah.
under the facade of democracy, they always say, "Oh, this is an internal matter. This is our internal matter," and that is what
Yeah.
China does,
Yeah.
what Russia
Yeah.
does. So the moment you question them on the human rights, it's the idea of whatever happens on in my territory, and whoever resides on my territory and is under
Yes.
my jurisdiction,
Yeah.
then that is my subject and I am the sovereign. And this relationship of this toxic equation of sovereignty and the inferior subject also then played out within the four walls of the house. So this
Sure.
whole idea of wanting ownership, wanting more and more and more, and also placing the burden of honor on what you deem to be the mother, either in the form
Yeah.
of territory, i.e. motherland, or the woman sitting inside the privacy of the house. If the
Yeah.
other man, you know, interferes within my territory, whether that is the state territory or the territory of my house, that is a direct attack on the woman who is
Yeah.
under my control. And now I will seek revenge. It's male ego versus male ego, and we will
That's right.
fight it out. There will be a duel. And that's why battles used to happen. And that's how private disputes are
Yeah.
also, especially where the honor of the women of your family was at the
Yeah.
center. Men used to enter into duels. So there are so many parallels between, the idea of statehood and the idea of what it means to be a man and patriarchy. They are both
Yeah.
territorial, and they are both all about making you feel like the man, as if you are making you, turning you into control freak. Both these
Yeah.
ideas are so territorial that they teach you how to be control freak. And the burden of the control, the burden of the honor goes on to the women. And because the
That's
woman is
right.
the motherland, oh, we hold you in such high regard, in such high esteem, that
Yes.
the women have to then play that role out. You have
Live
to
up to
keep
that.
on
Yeah.
proving that you are
Yeah.
worthy of that respect. Because if you're not worthy of that respect, then you're not even a woman. And if you're not even a woman, then you're not even a human being. And if you're not even a
That's
human
right.
being, human rights don't apply to you. And the patriarchy is completely free to do what it wants to do to you. You have
Oh,
no
yeah.
agency, no ownership over your own person. You are my
That's very
jurisdiction.
true. That's very true. And interestingly, the way you've just framed it so beautifully, I think, Benazir, whether one is a People's Party supporter or not, it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is that here was somebody who actually came to power, and we saw the reaction from all different entities, democratic and non democratic, and how they reacted to that. But here's the thing, Muneeb. I find that the Pakistani women have this, and I don't like using this word resilience because we're tired. I know I'm tired, and I don't want to be called resilient anymore. It's literally survival. That's what it comes down to. There's this continuous pushback. What do you think drives this fire to go against misogyny when we know what we're up against, which is the ugly waves of populism that do tend to sort of overwhelm us at times? And when I say us, I don't just mean females, but I mean people who are in this fight against misogyny.
If I were to look at it from an evolutionary perspective, I think that human beings at large, we, through thousands, millions of years of evolution and our ancestors, I think we've been programmed like that, we human beings at large, that we
Yeah,
are going to always fight back. We are going to put up resistance, in the sense that we wouldn't make it so easy, or wouldn't want to. So far as there is any life, health, and fight left within us, we wouldn't want people to just walk over us and be crushed under the weight of whatever injustice
right.
that is meted out to us. So I think that that's what has been driving our ancestors for so many years, and now for the past so many centuries. It's men who I think historically were the first ones to have asserted themselves aggressively. And
Yeah.
that's how they gained dominance. And that's the
Yeah.
only language that they have understood over all these centuries. Dominance, 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 control, control, control.
That's it.
They excluded women consciously from positions of power. They created this binary of private versus public because it
Yeah.
suited them. And they said that
Yeah.
whatever is in the public is for us to deal with, and
Yeah.
whatever is in the privacy, it's for us to dominate. But the private sphere is restricted for women, which meant that women could not become politicians, women could not become doctors, women could not become parliamentarians. So who was it that was setting the agenda? The legislative agenda, the political agenda, the norms of the society, the moral norms, the political, social, legal norms. Men, men, men everywhere. And
Yeah.
then as is bound to happen, if a certain group or certain tribe is able to assert themselves and claim certain privileges or benefits for themselves, those who have been otherized will
Yeah.
then start feeling. There will come a point that they are going to start feeling.
Yeah.
Because as far as we are alive, desires, the desire to be more, to want more, to have more, that's never going to die. So
Yeah.
no, no human being can be expected to just, sit by and see their rights being trampled upon. And so I
Yeah.
believe that that is what explains why the suffragettes who came out on the streets, and I'm talking about Britain, and generally we are
Yes.
saying that,
Yeah.
oh, it was very easy for women in the Western world to get their rights. No, they had to go on hunger
Nope.
strikes. I've read Emmeline
They
Pankhurst's
were
story.
force fed. Yeah.
They were force-fed, the kind of torture
Yeah.
that they had to face. And it didn't come easy. In fact, people in Pakistan, particularly the mullahs and the supporters, I think they overestimate Western decency. They think that Westerners were very decent and they
Yeah.
gave human rights to religious minorities and women and LGBT community on a platter. And that's not how it happened. Women had to put up a fight and for so long, and
That's
false
right.
promises were made to them and whatnot. And so that then, yes, because some early traces of the kind of feminist movement that we talk about today were found in the Western world. There's this misconception that, oh, feminism is a Western concept. It's not a Western
No.
concept. It's just
No, I
about
agree.
that perhaps it was able to gain a lot of publicity in a particular part of the world, which happened to be the West. But
Yes.
it doesn't mean that this was not bound to happen in our part of the world. It was bound to happen in
No.
our part of
Yeah.
the world as well. And so we see in South Asia and particularly in Pakistan that what we call resilience is actually, an attempt to put up a fight, to put up resistance to the very last, whatever fight is left in you, whatever last few breaths
Yeah.
are left within you, you're not going to let it go. So women have, and again, there's a misconception that women have only very recently started coming into, prominence in Pakistan. We keep saying Fatma Jinnah, Fatma Jinnah, Fatma Jinnah, but my own great grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
Begum Salmata Sadr Hussain, she was also, a very central part of the freedom movement, working
Yes.
alongside Mr. Jinnah and Fatma Jinnah when it came to Pakistan and the creation of Pakistan. And she worked as a volunteer when it came to
Yeah.
rescuing, retrieving their dead bodies and their mutilated bodies, women's mutilated bodies from trains which would be
Terrible.
coming to Pakistan. And she has been an eyewitness to that. And she was
Yeah.
also in the delegation when Pakistan was recognized as a UN member state. So I just came across a picture very recently where I can see her having a laugh with Eleanor Roosevelt. And this was the time when Mrs. Roosevelt, I think, was drafting the UDHR. So,
Right. Right. Right.
our histories are linked and they've got so much to tell us
They are
about our
linked.
past and the role that women played. So today, we speak of Asma Jahangir, Malala Yousafzai, Iman Mazari,
Of
so many
course.
Munir Jahangir, and so many women doing such great work. But it's not a recent phenomenon. It's just that history was being written by men. And because I have now become a
Yeah.
writer, I know the power of the pen. That,
Yeah.
history is documented by the person who holds the pen. And because women were barred from being able to write history, hell, even, authors and novelists like George Eliot had to write under pseudonyms. Jane
Yes,
Austen
that's
never
right.
had the kind of success during her lifetime, which she now enjoys. So the fact that women had to be anonymous for so long, or they had to write in the male voice, means that it's not like women were not making history. They were making history, but they were
They
not
were
recording
making
history.
history. That's right. And I love the fact that you picked up the suffragettes because, and the fact that women, so much of women's contributions have gone unnoticed. I mean, this is something that one of the examples that I like to quote is Anita Anand's book called Sophia. And it's about Maharaja Dalip Singh's
Yeah,
daughter, Princess Sophia, who
I read
was
the
Queen
yeah.
Victoria's granddaughter, goddaughter, sorry, goddaughter.
She was suffragette.
And she was a suffragette. And Anita only picked up on the story when she had, she was expecting her child and she was at home and she picked up one of those home and country magazines and she was going through it and there was a picture of the suffragettes and she saw someone. She said, "This looks like my aunt." The South Asian features and everything. And she when she tracked her down, she was shocked to find that there was a South Asian Indian woman who was a member of the suffragettes. And her story only came out, what, about a few years ago, a little short while ago.
Yes, yeah, that book. And I think
It's
that book popularized her.
it did, but it just goes to show that you're spot on, that this concept of feminism or this concept of women's rights, it's not a Western concept altogether. And I think you're very correct in pointing out that it did gain prominence, but then we tend to ignore the fact that we are living in a post-colonial world. So naturally, we're going to be consuming a lot of Western content and taking it from there on. But I think one of the things that's now happening is thanks to people such as yourself who are now sort of taking control of the historical narrative and saying, "Ek second, let's put things in context." I am hopeful about the future and that people will sort of, view and understand things differently. But I get worried when I see things such as, yes, we have the rise of populism as you've documented so meticulously in your book. Yes, we have the patriarchy. That's something that is perhaps always going to be there. It's a matter of how do you counter it instead of stamping it out. You've got to pick and choose your battles, right? But then,
Yeah.
Muneeb, how do you feel when you look at how intense the weaponization of the patriarchy is? Just when you think that they can't, it can't get any worse, it can't get any worse, boom, there's something else. Especially when you see it in the form of, in Pakistan, in the form of extremism of all kinds,
Absolutely.
of all kinds, from ideological extremism to religious extremism to social media extremism, where you now have tech facilitated gender-based violence. I mean, how, like I said, I don't want to be resilient anymore. I want to just wake up and find everything is fine because I'm so tired. How do you
Yes.
feel about this continuous weaponization that is just intensifying? It's like a vicious cycle. It's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Where do you see this taking us?
When I wrote my first book, because it's Pakistan centric, my first book is very
Yeah,
Pakistan centric because these are issues so close to home that I needed to get them off my chest first before I
of
could then
course.
concentrate on and talk about what's going on in the world at large. And that's what I did through my second book.
Yeah,
And when I was writing my first book, I was actually very angry, very, very angry, because I
yeah,
thought that whatever is going on right now, in the world. And of course, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, authored by Israeli, defense force and all the allies, was happening even at that time. But when I looked at, a society which is its own enemy in terms of that, I
yes,
thought
that's exactly
Pakistan
it.
ranked
Yeah,
the worst. Pakistan was
yeah,
the worst. I was thinking that, Pakistan is the worst enemy of its own in a way that other
of its
countries
own.
I don't think are. Now, I might have been wrong when I said or thought that, but it was that anger which drove me to write the book. And uh, but what happened was that by the time that I was writing the second book, and I had to get that off my chest as well, because I
Yeah,
realized that there was something more now which was left to be spoken about, and that's when I wrote my second book. That people like me in Pakistan, the kind of troubles that I face, not just for, being very vocal about me being a secular Pakistani. I am very
yeah,
secular in my attitude and outlook.
sure.
But I once engaged in a debate with Khalilur Rahman Kamal, the famous, infamous script writer, who has this
Yeah,
habit of using extremely abusive language and expletives on live television and still having his, ego massaged and pampered by the
absolutely.
media and by state apparatus. So I just remember that even though I'm not a woman, I don't have the lived experience of a woman, but I once debated this person, Khalilur Rahman Kamar, on TV. And what
Yeah.
followed was traumatic, to say the least. And what followed
Mm.
was that when a day later on my Instagram, I was flooded with hate messages in my inbox. And those people were telling me, how dare you say that why are abusive words only centered around women? I mean, mother, sister, etc.,
Yeah.
or in
Yeah.
Urdu, Punjabi, Roman, Ma.
Yeah.
Do you know why we don't base these abusive words or curse words around men, around fathers
Mm.
and brothers? Because we respect our women so much, and note the possessive our women so much. We
Yeah.
respect our women so much that the only way we can hurt our opponent, which happens to be a man, is by cursing
Bye.
their women. And
Yeah.
that's why there is no curse word which centers around the male. And I was like, I cannot reason with such a person. I cannot
How
even
do you,
reason.
how do you,
But
I know,
to
how do
kind
you
of
even begin? And I'm laughing not because I find it funny, because it's just our lived experience is so absurd. You can just think what is happening. What in reality is this?
absolutely right. So,
You know, yes,
I felt,
you
but
can't
also
engage.
some of the messages are so violent that people at home
Yeah,
actually said, my family members said, your life is fine. You're good to go. I mean, come on, you're a man. You come from a good background, which means that you wouldn't have to starve or sweat it out to,
yeah,
make a
yeah,
living. So just get into it. Don't just say this. But that's the point. If you have a brain which works even a little, and I'm hoping that perhaps my brain works. It's for others to judge. They can assess it better, but I hope that it does. Then you are bound to have an opinion, and you're bound to speak and not dumb yourself down. And that's the only
yeah,
thing I did. I really said that to me, it's abhorrent, the kind of language he used against Marvi Sarmat. And
yes,
this is what any decent human being is going to say, privilege or no privilege, elite or no elite. Any decent human being is bound to say that. And that's all I did.
yeah,
For that, I was getting such violent threats. So imagine how much worse it must be for women. And then how much worse it must be for women in Pakistan who belong to the lower strata of society. And that was, such a rude shock, a rude awakening for me. That,
yeah,
man, you don't have even the slightest of clues of what it means to be a woman in Pakistan. And
yeah,
then I saw the 2024 US election and JD Vance and Donald Trump and their rhetoric. And these people were saying that not just talking about childless ladies, but they were also talking about Kamala Harris, Trump's opponent, in such
yeah,
words, that she has spent her entire career being down on her knees. Now, these were the exact words used by the likes
yeah,
of JD
yeah,
Vance, as far as I remember. And the fact that at least 24 women had put allegations of rape, of sexual harassment, and so on and so forth against Donald Trump, and even
yeah,
a court of appeal judgment in England, if I'm not wrong, had found that there was some truth to those allegations against Donald Trump by Jean Carroll. And yet Trump's supporters and voters are so undaunted, and majority of Americans, who we were told were more educated than the Pakistanis and those
yeah,
Africans and natives and
yeah,
those savages, those racist undertones
yeah,
that the
yeah.
kind of that they use. Majority of the civilized population was totally unperturbed and not unnerved at all by the fact that this man might very well be. I mean, those excess Hollywood tapes which talk about grabbing women by the dash 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 had leaked out
Yeah,
and had
yeah.
24 women putting the worst kind of rape and sexual harassment allegations against this man, and they still voted for him, and they saw him as a relatable figure, and not just American men,
But
but American
Muneeb,
women.
that also,
Yeah.
I'm just going to just interrupt you there and say, but that also indicates what we long suspected, right? That a country like the US or even Britain, right? And by no means am I limiting it just to these two countries. I'm just mentioning for the sake of argument, is that these are inherently conservative societies. Nothing matters more to them than family values. But in their context, it's acceptable. In our context, it's seen as being savage. And yet we see the same patterns emerging. It's almost
Absolutely the same
we
pattern.
हाल है ना आप हम जैसे ही निकले. That's you
Uh,
turn out to be just like us.
it's just about, again, because they were the ones who were writing history, they were the ones who were shaping up global policy, and
That's
they are the
right.
ones who are
Yeah.
global policy even now. So
Yeah.
that's why, these tags of savages or illiterate have been attached to people here. But I think that the TLP mob sitting here, or those white supremacist mob sitting there, or the
Yeah. No difference.
QAnon conspiracy theorists sitting there, or the religious vlogger sitting in Pakistan. Why is it that they are very happy today that today UK Supreme Court judgment has just come in which the
Mm,
UK Supreme Court has decided that trans women are not women after all for the purposes of Equality Act. Why am I
right.
seeing Maulvis and right-wing white supremacists all celebrating and being so joyous over this
Yeah.
decision? Are they feeling
Yeah.
so empowered, despite the fact that they hate each other on so many other grounds? And that's where you start seeing that there's a pattern to it, and there's a global chain, there's a global network, and they are all in it together because the ultimate purpose is, absolutely the same: spreading hate.
And
And
by the
how
way,
do you
this is
do
not a
that?
conspiracy theory. I'm just saying this for audiences in case they turn around and say they're a conspiracy theory. It's not. You have to,
It's
in this
out there, it's
day and
open
age,
because
there's no
I'm saying
excuse to remain ignorant. You can see it.
absolutely. I mean, look, when Donald Trump was, when he was announced as the winner for the recent presidential election 2024 contest, who were the people who were the happiest? And that tells you a lot about who Trump is, and that tells us a lot about the network that there is at a global level between the far right in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
So, I mean, who were the happiest? Andrew Tate supporters, they were very happy, they felt empowered.
They were very
Uh,
happy.
Narendra Modi's supporters were very happy.
Oh, yeah.
In Pakistan, Imran Khan supporters were very happy, even though Imran Khan supporters are at the receiving end of backlash by the state. And a lot of it is politically engineered, let me admit it. I'm not saying that they deserve it or that
No.
I support.
No
I
one,
don't
no,
support.
no. That is
I
something we're very
also
clear on.
know.
Even if they don't speak up for us, we continue to speak up for them.
Yeah, I mean, I will speak the truth. I might not be
Yeah.
very fond of them, and I have never made a secret of it. But then
No,
I'm
no.
also not very fond of Imran Khan's political opponents, really, who are in power right now. I'm not very fond of them.
Yes,
I don't
yes,
like them
I
either.
know.
But then,
I know.
that's the thing about populism. Not majority of Pakistanis support the current rulers in Pakistan.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
the same things were done by Imran Khan, the same misogyny, the same transphobia, the same religious extremism being peddled by Imran Khan and the establishment which would have brought Imran Khan forward, then majority of our people, or at least majority of people sitting in Punjab, the majority of Pakistani elite would have said, "Oh, very good, good going. We
Yeah.
support you."
Yeah.
Because that is the danger and threat that populism poses. It makes very illegitimate things also look legitimate because you justify those illegitimate things under the garb of democracy. That, hey, the majority voted for this, and I turn back and
Yeah.
I say, yeah, well, the majority also voted for Hitler. Just see where that went. Majority has been
Yeah.
continuously in three electoral cycles, have been voting Modi into power again and again and again. And
I'm
what do I see
so
in India?
glad.
Nagpur on
I'm
fire.
Yeah, I'm so glad you've mentioned cycles because that was going to be my next question. That Muneeb, do you not find that this is all cyclical? There are cycles of change that go round and round and round. And for once, I'd like to see, civilian democracy take root for a more tolerant future. Do you see that happening anytime soon, given that you've now written this book, Age of Intolerance? Do you see this changing?
No. And that's why
No.
I wrote the book, because
Yeah.
whenever we say age of this, age of that, age of innocence, age of
Yeah.
populism, age of social media, or
Sure.
age of ignorance, you are already assuming that this is here and this is here to stay and for a long period, as far as the foreseeable future goes. And that's why I wrote the book, because I wanted it to be recorded in time that this is what somebody sitting in Pakistan, and people in Pakistan don't get to speak on global affairs that much because they are,
Yeah.
expected to just stick to their own parochial concerns, and they are not thought of as, being qualified enough to have a voice on global matters until unless they have settled in the US or the United
Yeah.
Kingdom or in a European country, sitting in Lahore, sitting in Pakistan. Hey, of what concern is it to you that Viktor Orban in Hungary is doing such and such things, or
Yeah.
this and
Yeah.
this is happening in Sudan, or there's an RSF versus Sudanese army situation going on there. But guess what? It does affect me because 9/11 was the starting point of this book. That after 9/11, what happens is that people from Pakistan, they get so sandwiched. I
Yeah.
might have the money to travel. I might have the qualifications to go seek job abroad and to try to,
Everything
tread the
changed.
water on a global level. But the fact that my name is not Mark Walters and my
Yeah.
nationality
Yeah.
is not from among the countries of the global north, that means I'm automatically at a disadvantage. And if your same thing comes again, if there's Muslimness to it because of your name or because of what your passport tells about you, well, then you have lost out on so many opportunities there and then. You might have
Which is,
all
yeah,
the belly
yeah,
in your fire.
absolutely.
I mean, all
Absolutely.
fire in your belly. You might have all the talent, but you're losing out. You're losing out. So I might not be able to compete on the global market for those reasons. I am able to compete in within the national market because not many people are educated or qualified in Pakistan. So I just felt that that was unfair. It is unfair even to a person coming from elite Pakistan. And if an elite Pakistani is going through these disadvantages, again, that brings me back to what you have to go through the experience of a Malala Yousafzai. Like you have to escape death for your voice to be
That's the
heard in the
other
UN. You can
extreme.
actually.
Yes, that's the other extreme. That's what I meant. The weaponization just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, like from one extreme to another extreme. And then you gain acceptance. Where does it end? How much more suffering do we have to go through to gain acceptance?
How much suffering. Now, in a way, there's this line in Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, which is my favorite novel, that knowledge
Hmm.
comes through suffering. But I
Yeah,
am of the belief that you don't have to suffer, and I don't glorify suffering. You don't have to suffer to be able to realize the worth of your own life and the worth of the other
yeah,
person's life. And so
absolutely.
I was just speaking about, democracy versus majoritarianism, was I not? And I was saying that just because the majority wants something does not make it legitimate and does not make it
No,
democratic either. So how does one distinguish
no,
between democracy and majoritarianism? This is a theme which I have addressed in both my books because this is
yeah,
something which pains me so much, this blurring of lines between democracy and majoritarianism. So let me
yeah.
simplify this for you. Even
Sure,
though things are not simple in real life, but still, for
go for
theory's
it.
sake, let me simplify it for you.
Yeah,
And my formula is, at the risk of sounding formulaic, that
no,
what
no.
I would not want for myself, I would never want to inflict the same on the other as well. If
Yeah,
your majority's wishes and if your so-called democracy cannot ensure this minimum basic guarantee, then I'm sorry, your democracy is not a democracy that I want. Your democracy is not one which I can be expected to respect. And your democracy is certainly not democracy, it's majoritarianism. It's
yeah.
mob majoritarianism when you feel that because this is the mandate of a very angry, violent majority, then they get the license to crush the minority on the other side, to, a state of voicelessness, to state of where they cannot even breathe. And this is where discrimination and hate comes from. You otherize people on the basis of their race, their sexual orientation, their sex, their gender, their class, their color, their
Everything.
ethnicity, their religion, and religion. My goodness,
It's
religious
it's a whole
otherization.
checklist. It's a whole
There's a whole
checklist of things
checklist.
you go
And
through.
then,
Yes.
in religious otherization, I think when you
Yeah.
otherize communities on
Yeah.
basis of
Yeah.
religion, that is so deadly. That is so deadly because I'm a Pakistani. I know. I
We've
know that
lived through.
outcome
Yeah.
is not.
Yeah. Yeah.
That in when you otherize people on the basis of religion, you're saying, "Hey, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this." But this otherization is divinely ordained, and so that becomes a no-go zone.
Yeah.
When we otherize people on the basis of political dissent or on the basis of race or on the basis of nationality, we somehow are agreeing that it's on the basis of your color or it's on the basis of
That's
your
right.
passport. But when you say that, it is religious grounds on which you are allowed to otherize people and to create a system of apartheid, you're not claiming responsibility for your own actions. You're actually saying that this
No.
is divinely ordained. And so that then becomes impossible. That particular injustice becomes impossible to surmount, and the weaponization of mass religious mob
Mhm.
sentiment is so deadly that you cannot fight it off. Tell me
And
about
who do
it
you
where
hold
I can.
accountable? I mean, the minute you absolve yourself of responsibility, who do you hold accountable?
Nobody.
It's No one, nobody,
And the
nothing.
state then becomes complicit, and then the state actually co-opts those angry religious mobs, and they feel so empowered that they just storm into, for example, a KFC in Pakistan, and they go there
Yes.
and they kill a
Yeah.
poor worker who
Yeah.
must be earning such low wages already. A 45-year-old man, they just kill him with impunity, and it's
Yeah.
because they have claimed that it's their religious duty to do whatever they're doing, no matter how doubtful their claims might be. But once that claims come forward, even the state cannot, push back. And if the state stops pushing back, that is where the social contract between citizens and the state, it breaks down.
Absolutely. This actually reminds you when Arundhati Roy was asked, it was a question related to, there we have Arundhati Roy, the Ministry
Yeah,
of Utmost Happiness, if I'm not wrong. She
yeah.
was asked about the Taliban. And I think that answer that she gave summed it up. She was like, when you talk about the Taliban, are you talking about a physical entity, a group of people? Is it an ideology? Is it a school of thought? Is it a belief? Are these values? Is it culture? You can't address a problem unless you've actually fully understood it. And in situations like the ones that you've just mentioned, I think it goes back that as Pakistanis, we've never really realized how things have impacted us until we reach this point of severe extremism. So that cycle of violence and that cycle of anger and that cycle of, weaponization, it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And I genuinely feel it's because we haven't even stopped to think about how we're reacting or what we're doing or even what our thought process is. I mean, I've said this so many times, I've written about it, that we need to look at our schools of thinking. There are three schools of thought, right? It's rational, cultural, and institutional. Have we even
Okay.
begun to understand what school of thought we have before? Like you said, you categorize it like who you are, what you are, that checklist. And if you
Yeah,
tick everything, then that's a good thing. If you don't tick everything, that's also a bad thing. Na aap idhar kyo, na aap udhar kyo. What do you do? Where do you go? Right?
yeah.
Um, this actually leads me to like how these movements, how all of these factors come together and then they lead to these movements that we now see unfolding onto social media, the most prominent one being the hashtag Me Too movement. That was incredible in the way that it went global. But then we also saw how it was misused. And now we're in a world of social media where you have, like you very correctly pinpointed earlier on, that there's misinformation and disinformation and hate speech. I mean, you've sort of linked everything, in your book. But Muneeb, do you think that digital media has the power to get us to stop, at least in Pakistan's context, to stop where we see acts of horror taking unfolding on live social media? And I'm not just talking what's happening with the genocide only, but also within Pakistan. Do you think that digital media has the power to make us stop and think, yeah, what are you doing? Do you hear yourself? Do you listen to yourself? Are you even checking what you're thinking? Do you think it has the power to do that?
Um, Unfortunately not. And no, I'm
Right.
not being pessimistic, but I
No, no,
think
of course not. I know, I
realistic.
know.
You know what? Just look at who owns social media platforms, and you'll get the answer: Elon Musk. And so algorithms are programmed and conditioned in such a way, those algorithms are going to decide what kind of information you're being fed.
Yeah,
And those who are going to feed that data into the algorithms and going to program them are the ones who are business tycoons, who already are exploitative, who are members of Trump administration, who are already silencing universities, who are already, firing federal workers, who are already suggesting that critical race theories or gender or queer studies, these programs should be dismissed and should be discarded at universities and on campuses. And we've seen that how Harvard University has recently, pushed back
yeah.
against the pressure coming from Trump administration and his whole, cabal of crooks like Elon Musk and whatnot. But how long are they going to be able to sustain? How
That's,
long are they
yeah.
going to be on their own? I mean, that only time will tell. But you see, now it's the likes of Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg who's decided that fact check, we don't need that. We don't need that. And we're going to, like, go a bit easy on and lenient on free speech, which means that basically people can peddle whatever hate speech that they want to. They can use words which are
No,
incendiary and insightful and put vulnerable, unarmed people in dangerous way. And Zuckerberg won't be doing much about it. And that is only to placate Trump administration. And if Elon Musk sitting there in Silicon Valley is going to decide what information a Muneeb Qadir sitting in this part of the world is going to consume, or what Muneeb Qadir can publish at the risk of being
yeah,
shadow banned, then I'm sorry, Muneeb Qadir might have found a platform of his own on which he is promoting his books, on which he is developing parallel narratives which are challenging what the Mullah Brigade in Pakistan is telling us, the narratives
yeah.
which the Trump Brigade and populists and far right white supremacists are telling us sitting in the global north. But Muni's platform is so little, so little, so little as compared to these giants that the speed at which their disinformation is spreading and that disinformation is being countered by Muneeb Qadir or a Mehr Hussain. There's such disparity between those speeds that whatever they are peddling, and Elon Musk and people who share his ideological agenda, it's happening at such a pace that we will never be able to catch up with it. So it's not
No, but
just about
Muneeb,
who has a point.
do you not think that you're spot on about how it's working? But the Me Too movement was something where there was a global pushback about this has happened to me as well. And then it was very sorry to see how it was misused. Do you not see another sort of movement emerging for what was hoped to be a good cause? Because, like you very correctly said, that Elon Musk and the Trump administration, and of course, the rise of global populism and the decline of democracy. Do you not see another similar movement emerging anytime soon, which was supposed to
So,
be a good
as in a counter
cause
movement?
as a counter movement?
Unfortunately, not. It's because I think that the woke brigade, and I do call
Yeah,
myself woke,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
the
yeah,
liberal or the centrist brigade in the post-World War II era, and
yeah,
up to this resurgence of populism, they had decades in which to shape up the narrative. And they did shape up their narrative, and they had been very
yeah,
successful. I think that even countries which are putting up this facade of being secular, I'm saying even for appearance's sake, they benefited a lot from secularism, even though it had its own disadvantages as well. Hyper neo-liberalism as well, economic policies which were not very useful to people who were at the lowest, again, strata of society. But by and large, those economies and those countries benefited a lot. But then
yeah,
frustrations started setting in. There was this feeling of, things getting out of hand, out of control. Identity
yeah,
politics also started to come into play. And
yeah,
I think it was exacerbated by the global pandemic that we faced, and that in itself worsened and aggravated the cost of living crisis. And along the same time that social media also became more mainstream,
yeah,
and people started, conversing more through use of social media when we were in a global lockdown, that people just found out the power of the pen. And this time the pen was in the form of a keyboard, and they became keyboard
yeah,
warriors.
yeah.
And realized that, before the actual change on the ground comes the change in narrative. And
That's right.
narrative, the ideological shift can be such a powerful tool, shaping up ideology and along identity politics lines is so powerful. It's so powerful a tool that once you can control people's brains en masse at large, that is when you can bring change on the ground. And I felt empowered through, I mean, I was pushing my liberal agenda in a not so liberal Pakistani society. And when
Sure.
I use the word agenda is thought of as a very negative word. And here I'm actually admitting that I have a liberal agenda. Well, yes, my agenda actually says save lives, save lives, save lives. Stop taking lives away on under any
Absolutely,
pretext.
absolutely. Yeah,
So yes, it's an agenda, but it's an agenda calculated to save lives. And the agenda of people who are opposed to me is that they don't care much about life. For them, it's the identity politics that's being played out. We are trying
yeah,
to save
yeah,
culture. We're trying to save our society from Western foreign funded agenda. Well, Western foreign funded agenda, I'm sorry, but they don't want the value of life to be valued in our country to begin with. So
yeah,
that
yeah.
liberal agenda is an agenda, but it's certainly not Western or foreign funded. In fact, you people were armed by the Western, and the global North back in the
That's what
80s,
I'm
and you
saying.
still
That's
hear
exactly. People, you need to stop and think about it before taking things
yes.
forward.
So,
Yeah.
any counter movement, unfortunately, right now, the anger is so new. The wounds are so fresh that
Yes.
the populists are feeling empowered, and this they are having a honeymoon period right now, but the honeymoon period is turning into nightmare for the likes of me, and it's
Yeah.
it's become so popular. Populism has become so popular right now that for next couple of years, if not decades, it's here to stay. What we can do is, in our own way, we can still, at least, we have to be able to tell each other and ourselves that we did not admit defeat that easily. So every single time that you
Yeah.
call out the hypocrisy of the religious bigots in Pakistan, you call out the hypocrisy of fashion designers sitting here who are shaming transgenders, who are shaming
Yeah.
religious minorities for what is happening in Israel, whilst they themselves go to United States of America. When they are teaching you to boycott KFC in Pakistan, their relatives are holding, shopping bags from H&M, and they are not boycotting
Yes.
American goods themselves.
No.
Every single time we call them out, they do feel frustrated. So that's a good counter narrative that we're developing here. Every single time I
Yeah.
write a book, and I actually give references to footnotes that this is what this fashion designer was doing at that particular time when they were shaming Pakistani transgenders for carrying out a Sindh march. We are challenging them every single time that I'm writing a book in which I say that Netanyahu, when he says that transgenders marching for Gaza is like chickens marching for KFC,
Yes. I remember that. Yes.
I reply back and I say, and in this book I've written that, and
Yes.
I'm saying something. Forget the book even. I'm saying something here right now. Who is the one that is celebrating transphobia and transphobic Supreme Court judgments right now? Yup, those people who are Netanyahu
Yep.
supporters, those people who are Trump supporters, Trump himself. Those are the very people who claim to
Yeah.
be champion of Netanyahu's cause. And what is that cause? If not, oh, they have a lot of problems with using the word genocide. They say, don't call it genocide, don't call it genocide. Netanyahu says only we have a monopoly on being the sufferers, being the sole sufferers. Nobody else can
Yeah.
suffer other than our own tribe. And I
No,
think
that's
that
right.
ability to suffer, it's so universal. It's so universal. If nothing else, the COVID pandemic taught us that our vulnerability. You
I
know,
agree.
the
I
greatest
absolutely agree.
so if I till today I found myself crying sitting in my room reading a book about the suffering of children, Jewish children during the Veldiv roundup in France, or during Nazi war crimes or genocide. If I can feel the pain of a Jewish child, pain is so universal. I am also capable of feeling the pain of a mother in Gaza whose video I saw 2.5 weeks ago, and it was not an AI generated video.
No.
It's also there
No.
on Owen Jones's vlog, crying with another toddler of hers that she found her baby girl child, 2 week baby's body without its head, her
No.
baby's body headless, and that mother is crying out in pain.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
forgot,
No.
I did not really care what part of the world she was coming from, what the color of her
Yeah.
skin was. I was not thinking of what her religion was.
It's a
I just put
human. It's a
myself in that
humanistic thing.
situation
Yeah.
and it made me shudder.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No,
no,
I
you
think
don't have monopoly over
ultimately,
suffering. Nobody has monopoly over suffering. And nobody has monopoly over inflicting suffering on the other.
no,
We
absolutely. I
own this space
completely
in
agree with
humanity.
you.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. And my last question, Muneeb, before we sum up, is are you working on another book at the moment?
Ideas are circulating in my mind, definitely, because I think, and I would want, perhaps my next book would be about wokeism.
Yeah.
Why do people hate it so much? Why is it now, becoming so unpopular that it's become, I mean, memes are being made about it. Even though I take
Yes.
wokeism very seriously, but the word wokeism in itself is, seen as a slur. And now I've seen that in Hungary, there's a constitutional amendment which says that there can only be two genders. I saw a constitutional amendment in Pakistan which
Yes.
tried to
Yes, that's
define,
right.
what your religion is and what your religion is not. And I've seen its consequences, so I can predict which direction Hungary is going to go into and what is going to happen to the LGBT community. So, people not being able to identify as what they want to identify as, even if they're not putting anybody else's life or physical safety or security at risk, their right to self-identify is being taken away from them.
Yeah.
Culture wars being fought out. Right-wing Western
I think we're
media.
seeing the death of individualism.
Yes, and this angry collectivism. Collectivism can be very empowering because I was
Oh,
talking about
yeah. I
evolutionary period
yeah.
and how you needed tribalism to survive. So tribalism could be very good if it does not mean a majority ganging up on a minority or dissidents. But now this war on wokeism, I'm seeing right wing losing its cool against a Netflix series called Adolescence. Why is right wing media so angry about adolescence? Why? And that is because they are angry that it exposes something about them. It
I'm
exposes the
so
manosphere.
glad you've mentioned that. And in fact, with adolescents, this is something that I feel very, very personally strong about because during the 90s, there was a famous case of a little child. His surname was, I think it was Bulgar. I'm forgetting. It'll just come to me. This was a 3-year-old child, and he had
Yeah,
gone.
yeah,
It was
Venables and
massive.
Thompson, also that case. Yeah,
That's yes, that's the
yeah,
case. That you must forgive me. I have a COVID mummy brain, so I it takes me time to remember things. And this was a very famous case in which he was with his mother. The
yes.
mother let go of his hand for a few seconds
And
just
was
to
killed
take
by two
some
children.
money out of her bag and to give to the butcher where she was buying some meat to take home and cook for her family. It was just a few seconds. And that 3-year-old was lured away. It was just a matter of seconds. I know there are people out there who blame the mother that why did she let his hand go? Well,
Yeah,
I think we have to look at other issues here than just blame the mother. Thank you very much.
yeah,
And the thing with adolescence is you very correctly say this is rage because people are like, oh, we're being exposed to what's happening. Well,
yeah,
I'm sorry. What those two other children, they were children as well, what they did to that little boy, what they
yeah.
did to his genitalia was so grotesque that it's never made it to the media. And those files will never be made
And they were
public.
not immigrants. Those kids were
And
not
they
immigrants.
were not immigrants, they were English boys, and they did that to an English toddler. But my point is that that sort of violence has always been there. So it's come full circle to what you're saying as well, that we are not
Absolutely.
the savages. This
You
is
know, I'll
you.
I'll just tell you one thing. That the outrage at adolescence on channels like GB News, Sky News Australia, or Talk TV. Why are they so angry about adolescence? And the reason behind that is they're saying, why are you not making any serials or movies on Pakistani grooming gangs operating in Britain? Why are you not showing Exil Ruda Kubana was not a
Yeah,
white
yeah,
man
yeah,
and he was not a
yeah.
white kid? So why are you not making things and I actually, and they haven't replied to it. I actually brought out at least three British productions, and there's a Norwegian film called What Will People Say? It's still available on Netflix,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
shows Pakistan's toxic patriarchal society, what it does to women. So they've made films on that. And in Britain, they've made a series, a BAFTA award-winning series, and it's very good. It's on BritBox called Three Girls, and it's based
Three
on the
girls.
Rochdale Pakistani grooming gang scandal, as it's
Yes.
called. So series have been made on that as well. There's another, TV movie which was broadcast on BBC called "Killed by My Father," and
Yeah.
it depicts Pakistani society living in Britain, and where a British Pakistani girl gets killed by her British Pakistani father. So the outrage by right-wing British media, I don't understand. People who are aligned
So
with
that's also a
Muslim
failure on
diaspora.
Britain's part. I mean, for so long, like you and I, both 90s kids, we heard multiculturalism, multiculturalism,
And
multiculturalism,
now Suella
and
Brownman says it doesn't work. Kevin
it's failed.
Badenoch says, well, multiculturalism we cannot have because certain cultures are better than others. That even I say, even I say
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
even I say that what is it that your democracy or
Yeah.
your so-called norms are calculated towards endangering lives or towards saving lives? But
Yeah.
to, rank cultures in terms of superior, inferior, no, culture. a lot of times I understand is used as a pretext to oppress those who are the most marginalized people. But then that is
Yeah.
exactly what Kemi Badenoch is also doing in her society. And so they are, rerouting all this anger and redirecting all this anger against Keir Starmer, Labour Party, Angela Rayner, because Angela Rayner, etc., even though they have their own hypocrisies, they are not the kind of hardliners that
No, absolutely.
Tommy Robinson would want Britain to have. They want a Trump of their own kind. But hey, isn't
That's
this so
right.
much fun that people like Liz Truss was saying we support Trump because he's going to save the West, and Russia is a huge threat to the West. Now, turns out that the same Donald Trump has become the de facto spokesperson of Russia, sitting
That's
there in the
right.
West. And I ask
Yeah.
people like us, where did your "I'm going to save the West" agenda? Where did it go? And so I think that all these people are united. Pakistani mullahs are united. The Hindutva in India are united. Zionism, all the peddlers of that particular school of thought, they are united on it. Trumpists are united on what? On their, culture wars against wokeism. They are
Yeah.
sick of wokeism. They are they claim that they will end wokeism. And so I think my next book might be about that. That
Well,
this
I
war
think, folks,
against
we just got a sneak peek into Muneeb Qadir's next book. Thank you so much, Muneeb. I look forward to reading it, and I thank you so much for joining us for this
Thank
year
you
for our
so much for having
festival.
me.
It's
And
been an absolute delight.
same here, absolutely. And to your viewers, I would like to say that if you want to find these books, just write Age of Intolerance, Muneeb Qadir, or Paying the Price, Muneeb Qadir. You find the links. Vanguard Books has both these books on their websites for international delivery. They are also available on Amazon. So I hope that you do get to read it. And because I think these are the kind of conversations we need to be having
Yeah.
in this age of intolerance.
Absolutely. We'll be sharing the links underneath this video, so please do check them out. And Minnie, if you could also share your Instagram, sorry, your Twitter X account details. So in case anybody wants to, and be polite, people. If anybody wants to engage with Muneeb, he's only going to answer if you say something sensible. Thank you so much. Take care. Goodbye.